Hello, Grand Archive players. Let's answer a rules question. What does it mean for something to be ephemeral? How does the ephemerate mechanic work? Let's first take a look at what it means for an object to be ephemeral. Being ephemeral is a state or property of an object, in the same manner as being rested, distant, fostered, etc. These states are binary, that is, an object is either in that state or not in that state. An object is not ephemeral by default and will remain that way unless something makes it ephemeral. The state of an object will reset to its default value, that is, not ephemeral, if the object changes zones, that is, leaves the field. Some effects care about whether or not an object is ephemeral. For example, Fleeting Guard has a stronger effect the more ephemeral objects you control, and Blighted Jewel will give ephemeral allies +1 power if that ally entered the field during the current turn. In addition to this, being ephemeral has an inherent meaning in the rules. It applies the following replacement effect. If this object would leave the field, banish it instead. That is, it goes to banishment instead of any other zone. As a reminder, replacement effects directly modify certain events, in this case, an object on the field changing zones, and does not use the stack and cannot be responded to. If an ephemeral object were to go to any zone, such as the hand, memory, material deck, main deck, or graveyard, it goes to banishment rather than ever going to that zone. One major consequence of this is that on-kill and on-death effects specifically require an object to go from the field to the graveyard. Therefore, ephemeral objects will not trigger these effects. For example, Lorraine Blademaster's on-enter effect will not draw a card upon one of her attacks destroying an ephemeral ally, and Alice, Distorted Queen's Phantasmagoria Mastery will not gain a haunt counter if an ephemeral Spectre ally is destroyed. If an ephemeral object leaving the field would go to banishment, it will essentially have no particular interaction with this replacement effect. Each player has only one banishment zone. There is no distinguishment of different types of banishment. For example, if an ephemeral object was suppressed, it will leave the field and enter banishment. Like with any zone change, most continuous effects will immediately cease their effects, and in this case, it will immediately return to its default state of being non-ephemeral. As long as the banished card has not changed zones further, at the beginning of the end phase, the delayed trigger from the suppress effect will look for that card in banishment, successfully find it, and return it to the field. Non-objects can also be ephemeral. Activating a non-object card, such as an action card, by ephemerating it, causes it to be ephemeral on the effect stack. This functions somewhat similarly to how it does for objects, that is, the card activation will be banished if it were to leave the effect stack instead of going to any other zone. In the majority of cases, action cards from the stack leave the stack by resolving, fizzling, or being negated, going to the graveyard by default in all these cases. An ephemeral card activation will go to banishment instead of the graveyard. So that's what happens when something is ephemeral, but how does something become ephemeral in the first place? Objects can become ephemeral in a few ways. Some effects turn objects ephemeral, whether that be itself or something else. If it is a triggered ability, it can be responded to. For example, one can destroy or otherwise move a flame-bound Drog, while its own on-enter ability is on the stack and not yet resolved, while it has not yet become ephemeral. Objects can also become ephemeral if they are activated via the Ephemerate mechanic. Cards with Ephemerate can be activated from the graveyard using their Ephemerate cost. This represents an alternative method of playing a card, with permission to do so from the graveyard rather than the hand by paying the specified cost. An ephemerated object card activation becomes ephemeral as it enters the field. An ephemerated non-object card activation becomes ephemeral on the stack. We've talked about both these cases earlier. As a card activation, it is subject to any other restrictions of card activations. Ephemerated cards can only be activated at the timing of that card, that is, slow speed for most cards such as objects, and fast speed for fast action cards. Ephemerated card activations are also subject to element checks, and your champion must have that element enabled. Note that even if there is a nullifying lantern in play, turning the cards in graveyards into norm element, the element requirement is still checked. The reason for this is a bit technical, but according to the steps of card activation, the element legality is checked after the card activation is moved out of the graveyard onto the stack, so it must still be obeyed. Note that this means there is no opportunity to banish a card from the graveyard if it is currently being ephemerated, as the activated card will have left the graveyard by the time players next get opportunity to respond to that activation. Censor of Restful Peace will remove the ephemerate ability of cards in the graveyard. These cards will not have the ephemerate ability and cannot be activated. Be careful not to confuse ephemerate with activated abilities. Some abilities can be activated from the graveyard, and while they have some resemblance to the ephemerate mechanic, they are functionally different. For example, Remnant of Will has an Ephemerate ability. Using this ability to play this card from your graveyard counts as a card activation and can only be done at the card's own speed, slow in this case, and moves the card to the stack upon activation, where its element will be checked. As a card being played that is activated, it would also potentially trigger Alice, Phantom Monarch. In contrast, Maledictum Vitae does not have an Ephemerate ability, it has an activated ability. Activated abilities are fast speed by default, and do not necessarily move the card anywhere upon activation, although this specific ability does end up moving the card to your lineage upon resolution. Since it is not a card activation, the element is not checked, although this specific ability does have an element bonus restriction. Using this activated ability does not count as playing a card and would not trigger the inherited effect of Alice, Phantom Monarch. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.